Hello and welcome to the Almost Sharp podcast. My name is Charlie and I'm going to be your host on this pod. This is the first inaugural episode of the Almost Sharp podcast. This is purely for fun, so please don't take this too seriously. Are there a million NFL picks pods out there? Yes, there are. This is just another one to go into there, but I really just want to have fun with this and kind of bring anyone who wants to listen along for the ride. So thanks very much for being here. I expected just to be me here today. That's fine. But I wanted to kind of break down what the theme of this show is going to be. For the last 4 years, I have been in a league called the Monopoly Football League. And what that is, it's a $50 buy-in for anybody who wants to play. There's about usually 50 people who do play, $50 buy-in, and then you get $10,000 in Monopoly money, right? Not real money. It's just $10,000 Monopoly money of how you want to spend on your picks that week. Now, it is very, very specific. You're not betting over-unders. You're not betting parlays. You're not betting anytime touchdowns. You are simply betting on teams against the spread, right? You have to make a minimum of 4 picks every single week. You can do more than that. You can bet 12 games if you want. I would not advise on doing that, but you bet on at least 4 games with a minimum of $100 per bet, right? So you get a $10,000 bankroll, so you have to be betting at least $400 every single week. So, 4 games, at least $100, that's $400. You can obviously do more, but the whole point is you're playing against these other 50 people. So at the very end of the season, you want to be the one with the most amount of money. And to kind of go a little bit further on that, not only are you going to be spending more money, not only are you going to be competing against these people during the regular season, but then the top 15 people in the league during the regular season then get to go on and bet the playoffs. About those 15 people get to go bet the playoffs. That's when a rate goes up to about $1,000 per pick, and you have to bet every single game as well. So it's a lot of fun. We'll worry about the playoffs down the road, but I just wanted to give you an overview of kind of the picks you're going to be following. And you're saying, okay, hey, that's great, Charlie, but why do I care? Why is this important for me to listen to besides just listening to you talk about your picks for the week for this random football league? The reason I want to do this is because I've kind of found that if we just stick to betting on games that are against the spread and don't pay attention to parlays, don't pay attention to anytime touchdowns or over-unders, you name it, and just simply bet games individually against the spread, you can make a pretty good profit off of it. So I wanted to give my advice, give my picks, and if anybody wants to follow along and bet the same games, on their own gambling sites, whatever it may be. I'm not going to give any free ads here. I think that'd be great. But really, it's just something that I've done in the past, that if you just kind of take it simple and don't spend your money on parlays and just do the spreads, you could end up, making a little bit of money. And let me kind of explain that. So if we look back on my Monopoly Football League, my history of this, again, this is my 5th year. I've done it 4 seasons in a row. To go back to 2021, my very first year, I went through the regular season. I made it to the playoffs, started at $10,000 in this Monopoly money and got up to what would have been $88,000 from $10,000 in the Super Bowl. I had $44,000 riding on the Rams to cover the spread against the Bengals. But if anybody remembers that game, the Rams missed an extra point and did not cover the spread. So I did not win, but it would have been about 88,000. But if you want to talk about, hey, I made 10,000 into $44,000 and then bet it all and lost, right? In 2022, I won the whole thing, right? I took $10,000 and I brought that up all the way to $240,000, right? With the very final game I made a $100,000 bet and won the league pretty easily. And that was with a 57% guess rate during the season as well. So take that with a grain of salt. 2023, the year after that, I took a huge gamble in week 7, bet the took the Lions to beat the Ravens in week 7 and cover the spread. But if anybody remembers that game, the Ravens absolutely blew out the Lions, and I was out of the league after week 7. So, and then last year, came back, had a pretty decent year. Started with 10,000, built it up to 65,000 during the regular season, and then I lost in the wild card round, again betting the Ravens to not cover the spread. So I took the Steelers over the Ravens and ended up losing and lost all my $65,000 on them. So it was unfortunate, but hey, it happens. But anyway, the whole reason I'm telling you this history is because, hey, we took $10,000 and we brought it up to one time $240,000. One time we brought it up to $65,000. Another time would have been $88,000. Long story short, as long as we're not taking, well, you could just say, hey, as long as we're not taking gambles on the Ravens to get beat, then we'll do just fine. But really, it's like, hey, let's just take the spreads. Let's take the easy picks. We don't need to do parlays. Let's just take all these games against the spread and see how we do. And I would love for you guys to come along on the ride. So let's take a quick break, and then we will kind of dive into the board and make some picks this week. Thanks. All right, and just to kind of give you some information here, yes, I took the $10,000 of Monopoly money, made it into $240,000. In Monopoly money, that's great and good, but how do I go about doing this, right? How do I go about making my picks? And to kind of give you some understanding of what that looks like, 2021, I was 55% accurate in guessing against the spread. 2022, I was 57%. The year I won and guessing correctly against the spread. 2023, 45% against the spread, did not do a great job. That's when I lost in week 7. And then 2024, I was last year I was 58% correctly guessing against the spread. So pretty good. But now how do I make those picks? And I like to follow the Bill Simmons method of guess the lines, right? So every single week, usually on a Monday, I'll pull up all the games, put them into an Excel spreadsheet, and go through each and every game and guess what I think the line is going to be for that game, right? And then once I do that, I look at Vegas and see what they say, and then I say, okay, hey, I was off or close to the line or wasn't close at all. But to give you an example, say the Ravens are going to the Bills on Sunday. And I guessed that the Bills would be 2.5-point favorites against the Bills. And I was wrong. Bills are only 1.5-point favorites. So I could say, hey, look, I think the Bills have a little bit of an edge here. I think this should have been like 2.5 points. So I'm going to take the Bills in this game because I thought they should have been favored by 2.5 instead of 1.5, right? But that's not the only thing I do. I still like certain teams more than others, and just because, hey, maybe I guessed the line incorrectly doesn't mean like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to bet that game. I also look at my historical trends, right? Whether I've been doing Guess the Lines for 4 years, I've been doing this Monopoly Football League for 4 years, and I have certain data saying, hey, I bet the Eagles better or the Commanders better, based on my historical betting trends or my guessing trends. It also has, hey, Charlie, when you have been off by the line by like 2 points or 1 point, this is how you do. You're better at betting games that you're only a point off or a 1.5 off versus a game that you might be off by 6 points or 5 points. And so I do look at that data. It's not going to be super important here, but it does. I will mention it. And I just want to let everybody know that I do have that data to kind of help me decide on what games I want to pick. But really, ultimately, I do watch football. I do pick games based on like, hey, do I like a team more than the other team? I'll look at, hey, they're traveling a long way, or they had a short week, or hey, somebody is injured. I know Vegas kind of brings that into the lines as well. I'm not saying, hey, this is going to give me a more accurate guess, but these are all just things that I look at. So having said all that, let's take a look at some of these lines and have some fun here. All right, so let's take a look at some of these lines here. And again, we have to pick a minimum of 4 games that we're going to bet on this week, right? So let's start with the very first game of the week on Thursday, the 4th, right? It's the Dallas Cowboys at the Eagles, defending champion Eagles. I guessed that this line was going to be Eagles by 7, right? And it ended up being, still currently is, Eagles by 7.5. So I was pretty close to the line. I figured, hey, the Cowboys just got rid of Micah Parsons. The Eagles are, the champions. I really kind of want to stay far away from this game. I don't think the Cowboys are as bad as some people say they are. They have Dak Prescott returning, CeeDee Lamb. They don't have much of a running game, but they're going to air it out. And a lot of these first week games, it's just got to treat it like it's a preseason. And if I had to bet, I would probably take the Cowboys to cover 7.5, just because we're getting that little half point over the, touchdown and extra point, that 7. But again, I kind of want to stay far away from this game. So we'll see. Again, week 1 is something I did not tell you guys, but I really don't like to spend, I'm probably just going to bet $100 or $200 on each of these games, because it takes a couple of weeks to kind of figure out, hey, which teams am I most confident in? And like I said, a lot of these you can kind of treat it like the preseason. Teams are still kind of getting warmed up. You might have a slip and a fall, and you'll see in the survival leagues that a lot of people are in. Most people lose that first week because, no one really knows how good you are, and those preseason, it just kind of feels like preseason. So I'm not probably going to bet a lot on most of these games, and I'm going to stay away from the Eagles game. The second game, Chiefs at Chargers, that one's in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Hopefully everybody's ACL stays intact. I do not like international games. I'm going to stay away from almost every international game that we have, just because I do not feel confident in betting those, because you don't have a home and away. Both teams are traveling. One team might be more fatigued than the other, and one team might just be wanting to go home the whole entire time they're in Brazil. So I'm going to stay away. I did guess that this line was going to be 3.5 for the Chiefs. It is 3.5 for the Chiefs. So I got that one exactly. But again, I am staying away from this. And you'll hear this a lot. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth and analysis for games I don't like, because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. And again, I'm going to pick 4 games. And we'll kind of figure those out once I go through all the lines here. Third game that I have on mine is the Dolphins at the Colts. Everybody hates the Dolphins. I do not hate the Dolphins as much. They still have Tua. When Tua's healthy, I think he wins 65% of his games, something like that. So as long as Tua's healthy, I don't think they're that bad. I don't think their defense is very good, but still, they're playing the Daniel Jones-led Colts. It's just awful. I thought that the Dolphins were going to be favored by 2.5 games here, but it's the Colts by 1.5. Again, you might be like, Charlie, you're stupid. Why am I listening to this podcast when you thought the Dolphins were going to be ahead? And that, again, I don't know. I totally messed that up, but at the same time, I do really like the Dolphins here, because anytime anyone's facing Daniel Jones, I am going to pay attention. So we'll circle that one, the Dolphins and Colts. I do like the Dolphins there. Then we have the Steelers and Jets. Man, talk about a revenge game for both sides. Aaron Rodgers going back to the Jets for a revenge game, and Justin Fields staying at home playing his former Steelers. So again, I don't really like either of these teams. I think the Steelers might be a little bit better. I guess that the Steelers are favored by 3. It is the Steelers by 2.5. So if I had to take a side, I'd probably take the Steelers. But again, not a lot of analysis needed to be done here. I just don't think either of those teams are particularly great. Steelers are average. Jets could be absolutely awful. So we're going to stay away from that one too. Next game is the Carolina Panthers at the Jags. Another game, just, Jaguars could be better under Liam Cohen. Panthers could be better with Bryce Young. But at the same time, it's not really something that I'm interested in betting, because I want to kind of see how these teams progress as they go throughout the year. And maybe we'll take a swing here in the next couple of weeks. But I want to see how Bryce Young looks. I want to see how Trevor Lawrence looks. Shout out Trevor Rogers for the Orioles. So I want to see how Trevor Lawrence looks before we really make any bets for them. And plus, both mediocre to not very good teams. We're going to stay away from betting on bad teams for now. Next is Cardinals Saints. Talk about teams that are not good. Saints probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Some people are pretty high in the Cardinals. I will wait to see that. So again, we're going to kind of wait and see with this game too. I bet that it was going to be Cardinals by 3. It is Cardinals by 6.5, and I hate that. I really hate that. My model says, hey, Charlie, you should stay away from this, because anytime I have such a big discrepancy between the line and the actual my guess in the Vegas line, it says, hey, just stay away. You're way over your head here. So I probably will kind of listen to my past trends there and stay away from this one. And for everybody who was wondering about the Panthers-Jags, I did guess that the Jags would be favored by 4. They're only favored by 3.5. So again, we're staying away from the Jags and Saints and Panthers and Cardinals this week, right? All right, next game is the Giants at the Commanders. I guess that the Commanders were going to be favored by 6.5 points here. They're only favored by 5.5. So I was off by 1 here. Who knows with the Giants and Russell Wilson? Maybe when they get Jackson Dart in there, I'll start betting on some games. Jaden Daniels is probably great. Jaden Daniels, is probably great. I want to kind of see what that's going to look like before I start betting on games. I think there might be a sophomore slump. I don't think he's going to be like C.J. Stroud, though, completely, only because I believe in Jaden Daniels more than C.J. Stroud. But again, not something we need to risk the first week when we're betting just 4 games. We'll circle that one and come back to it, but I don't think that's what we want to bet on. The next one is the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Atlanta Falcons. I said that the Bucks would be favored by 2. They're favored by 2.5, so I was off by a half point there. Again, Michael Penix Jr., second year. We'll see how he does. I think he might be pretty good. I think he might be a pretty decent quarterback, but again, we're not going to take any chances there. So we're going to wait on this game just because of Michael Penix. I'm a big Baker guy. Love Baker Mayfield, but we'll see how Michael Penix does in this first game and maybe revisit next week. So we're going to stay away from this one. All right, then we have the good old Joey Burrow and the Bengals visit the Cleveland Browns, where the Bengals have usually fallen short in Cleveland. I don't know what it is about going to Cleveland for the Bengals, but they always seem to lose there. I guess that the Bengals are going to be 6.5 point favorites. They're only 4.5 point favorites, which, I'm kind of surprised by that. I think the Browns are pretty awful. I'd love me some Joe Flacco. Don't get me wrong here. But the one thing I will say is that the Bengals this year were actually playing their starters a lot in the preseason. So I kind of do like taking the Bengals here if it's going to stay at that 4.5 number. So we'll kind of see on this one. But I'm really leaning towards the Bengals here because they have played their starters. They might be more ready to go out of the gate than they have been in years past. So we're going to circle that one as well. The next couple games we have the Raiders at the Patriots, right? I don't know about this. I guess that the Patriots were going to be favored by 1.5. They're 2.5 point favorites in actuality. So I was a point off. We'll see about Drake May. Again, we have all these second-year quarterbacks that are coming out and playing. I don't know. Maybe Drake May will be good this year. I have high hopes for him, but let's just give him a game to kind of get warmed up. We don't need to bet this game. We'll see how Drake May does. Geno Smith is with Pete Carroll and the Raiders, and I'm sure they'll be better than they were last year. But again, new coach, new quarterback. Let's give that a game or two. All right, the next game, 49ers at Seahawks. We have good old Mike McDonald and the Seahawks with Sam Darnold starting out there. This is, I guess it was going to be 3.5 points in favor of the 49ers. Kind of away favorites. It's actually 2.5 for the 49ers at the Seahawks. And, Christian McCaffrey is healthy. He's good to go. Brock Purdy, good to go. George Kittle, good to go. They're missing Ayuk. Sounds like Juwan Jennings is going to play. And again, they had such a bad year last year. Let's give them a couple games. The whole point of this exercise is, hey, we don't need to overreact. We don't need to bet every game. Let's see how they start out. If somebody gets injured, so be it. We'll kind of adapt as we go, but we do not need to be betting this game when we just need to pick 4 of these games out of, 18 games, or 17 games here, 16 games. Jeez Louise. So we're going to kind of put that one to the side. Now we have the Titans and the Broncos here coming up as well. The Broncos, I guess, we're going to be favored by 6.5. They're favored actually by 7.5 over the Titans. I like Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward's going to be pretty good. Seems like he's pretty poised, like Jaden Daniels is back there. But the rest of the team is just does not look very good. I don't know if I'm a big fan of the Titans coach yet. So we'll really wait and see on them for sure. Broncos, I'm sure Bo Nix will be good. But again, second-year quarterback under Sean Payton, I think he'll probably have a pretty darn good year. It's a team I'm circling to kind of bet on a lot. But, they're already 7.5-point favorites against the Titans. And we're just going to kind of wait and see for that, maybe get some rust off. You never know what can happen in that game. So we're going to wait on that one too. All right. Lions and Packers. Man, I don't know what I was smoking when I guessed this game, but I guessed that the Lions were going to be favored. And all things to be considered here, I made this guess before Micah Parsons was traded. So I said the Lions were going to be favored by 2.5 points. It's actually the Packers by 2.5, obviously. I still probably would have bet the Lions a little bit, but I guess, Vegas is saying, hey, you have a new offensive coordinator, you have a new defensive coordinator. What do you think you're doing here? Well, there's no reason the Lions should be favored. I still am a big believer in the Lions, so I would definitely take the Lions here. I still like the Packers a lot, so again, we're going to stay away because I think both those teams are good, and we'll just see how it plays out. See how both of them look and maybe bet next week or the week after. All right, the next game is the Texans at the Rams. I had this as the Rams favored by only 2. They were favored by 3.5. I kind of just like the points here. Matt Stafford hasn't really practiced all offseason. CJ Stroud is going to be looking to kind of get out of his slump from his, the second-year slump. So I think he's going to be trying to slinging it around. If we had to take a game, I think I'd be circling this one for the Texans to give me 3.5 points. If that stays at 3.5, I think I'm going to go for it. And again, this is one of those lines where it's, hey, I'm off by 1.5 for an away underdog. And historically, I've bet pretty well against those. So if I had to look at my model, they say, hey, that's probably your most accurate pick here. So I would go with that. So I might stick with that. We're going to circle it. I think I like the Texans here against Matt Stafford, who hasn't really practiced too much. And we'll see. Maybe Nick Chubb has a big game for the Texans too, and he might only get a good 5 weeks out of Nick Chubb. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, and we're going to circle this one and probably bet it. So the next game that I've already referenced a couple times here on the pod is the Ravens at the Bills. If you heard me earlier, I did say the Bills were favored by 2.5. They're only favored by 1.5. That's great. I think both these teams are great. I guessed that the Ravens would be 2.5-point favorites. I would still probably take the Ravens here. If you watch that playoff game last year where the Bills won, I think the Ravens were the better team. Full disclosure, I am a Ravens fan, so you're going to hear a lot of biases come out my way. I try to stay away from betting the Ravens because I am so biased, and I know how good the Bills are. So I'm not going to say, oh, yeah, the Ravens are definitely going to win this game. It's kind of a pick 'em here, so I'm going to stay away from this one, really just to take away from my own biases. Now, this next one, we have the Vikings at Bears, the very last game of the week. The Bears here are favored. Well, I guess that the Vikings were going to be favored by 2 points, and they're only favored by 1.5. Now, this one, Caleb Williams, second-year quarterback. I know I've been saying, hey, let's just see how these second-year quarterbacks do. I think Ben Johnson is going to want to make a statement here where he's saying, hey, let's go ahead and show everybody that I've meant to be a head coach, that I can turn around this offense. It usually doesn't happen this quickly, but you have J.J. McCarthy starting for the Vikings and a first-year quarterback. He missed all of last year. This is going to be the first time he's seeing, NFL players zooming across the field. And I didn't think he did that much at Michigan. Again, I am not a pro scout by any means, but he wasn't asked to do a whole lot of Michigan, and now they're expecting him to lead a passing attack for the Vikings. I don't know. I think, we're going to have a fun narrative here with the Bears winning and covering that 1.5 points. And everybody's going to be talking about, oh, Ben Johnson's back. Caleb Williams is back. They're going to be winning they're going to be going to the playoffs and maybe making the Super Bowl. Chicago's going to be so excited. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but I think that's a fun narrative that they're going to be talking about on Tuesday afterwards. So we'll see what happens. I am leaning towards the Bears here, and I think we'll take it. So, all right. So that is the list of games here for this week. If you guys remember, I circled a couple of these that I really did like, and I am really leaning towards the Dolphins over the Colts. That would mean the Dolphins are, 1.5 underdogs at the Colts. I'm going to bet against Daniel Jones and for Tua. I know there's been some bad vibes down there, but maybe they want to say, hey, you know what? We actually are for real. Mike McDaniel's fighting for his job even in week 1. So we're going to take the Dolphins 1.5 here, and we'll talk about how much money we're going to bet here in a second. I just want to get these down. So we're taking Dolphins plus 1.5, and then we're going to go back down to the other game I circled, the Bengals at the Browns being 4.5-point favorites. I think that line's too low. I think the Bengals need to make a statement. They lose their first game every single year, and Zach Taylor really needs to get a win under his belt for the opener. So we're going to take the Bengals here at minus 4.5 against the Browns, and maybe they can shake off this rust here and by what they did by playing their starters in the preseason. Maybe that makes a difference here. So we're gonna bet that one too. The third game we're gonna bet is the Texans at the Rams. This is the one I'm least confident in. I'm just gonna take, hey, CJ Stroud really wants to make some noise. I think Nick Chubb is a great running back still. He may not last that long, but hey, we're going to take advantage of Matt Stafford not playing very often and not playing or practicing much this preseason and in training camp. So we're going to take the Texans and see how that does. And then my last bet is going to be for the Bears, what we just talked about. Let's get some Caleb Williams hype train going, and we'll see if JJ McCarthy can prove me wrong here. But until he does, we're gonna bet against JJ. And I do love Kevin O'Connell, but man, we're going to take a swing and see what happens. So those are my bets for the week. Dolphins plus 1.5 against the Colts. Bengals minus 4.5 against the Browns. Texans 3.5 point. They're getting 3.5 points at the Rams. Hopefully if we can stay under there, at least maybe they lose by a field goal and we save that one. And then lastly, the Bears being 1.5 underdogs at home dogs, baby. So we'll see how that goes. And we're going to just put $200 on each of them. So we're going to put $800 of our $10,000 pot, of our $10,000 bankroll on these week 1 games and see how it goes. So thanks so much for listening. Again, if you want to follow along with these lines, one more time for you. Dolphins plus 1.5 at the Colts. Bengals minus 4.5 at the Browns. Texans plus 3.5 at the Rams. And then lastly, Bears plus 1.5 at home against the Vikings. So please follow along if you want. I'll obviously update my standings as we move forward. I'll say, hey, was I 4-0, 3-1, 2-2, 0-4? How much money I won? How much money I lost? We're not going to take any big gambles the first week of the year and kind of see how we did here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Again, I doubt anybody's listening to it, but I had a lot of fun just going through the board with you guys. If you guys want some extra picks and say, hey, you know what, Charlie, I love following your spreads. If you want to hear my MVP, all that fun stuff, maybe I'll just drop that at the end of the pod here and we can go from there. But thanks so much for listening, and hopefully we win these spreads. Let's go.